much, and welcome to the Spot On panel. I've been moderating the Spot On panel for a few years, and I just realized it's my first Spot On panel without Eugene Kaspersky. So he will be deeply missed, but we have stellar replacements here. We have Bruce, of course, from the Belfer Center at Harvard University. I attended the Kennedy School myself, and during my time as a student there, I was always instructed never to challenge a guy from Belfer because they literally think about nuclear counter-strikes every single day. So, looking forward.
They are scary people.
They are scary people. And of course, we have Bruno from the World Economic Forum, who has been working on IT infrastructure and challenges to the IT infrastructure for more than 20 years, and is also the graduate of an equally scary institution, the École de Guerre Économique. So, Bruce, we want to start with you. I mean, the people here, the organizer of the conference, told me not to be too gloomy, and then I came across one of your latest publications, and the title is "Click Here to Kill Everybody: Security and Survival in a Hyper-Connected World." Are we going to wipe our civilization with a few clicks?
One hopes not. But the title does speak to something that we are all talking about here. That in fact, as we become more computerized, as we become more interconnected, that these catastrophic failures will happen. And we're talking here about how to deal with that. And I like hearing the discussions about supply chain, because that is truly an insurmountably hard problem. I mean, we didn't even get into how hard it was. I like talking about incentives and regulations and ways we can improve hygiene, about users. Because we are moving into a world where everything is interconnected, everything is vulnerable in ways that we are not expecting. Right? The failures we think are not what's going to happen.
But does that mean that the line between online and offline is becoming increasingly blurry?
I don't think there is a line anymore. I mean, so we kind of cross one line when we move to these things. Remember when you used to enter a chat room and upload and download and go online? It was something you did. Now it's something you're doing all the time. And then this is going to change, because this is still something I go to. It's got a screen, it's got a keyboard. But the computers of tomorrow, really of today and tomorrow, the IoT computers, are something that's in our environment. There are thermostats, our appliances, the lights here. And it's fully immersive. So it's not a place we go to anymore, it's a place we're in. So that line is already blurred.
Would you agree, Bruno? I mean,
yes,
you have been working on infrastructure for a long time.
Yes, hyperconnectivity build dependence for our societies on those devices and on the data dependence. But today is, if you remember the theme of Davos this year, Globalization 4.0, building new architecture, I do believe that cybersecurity is a good topic where we need to refocus on a new path. And we need to change the culture around security and to embed this culture from a very young age.
But to change that culture, do you have the impression that people even use the same language? That, for example, policymakers and techies like you can even talk to each other?
So this is actually something I've been thinking about a lot, this idea that we actually need tech and policy to talk to each other. And you'll see this if you watch the U.S. Facebook hearings. It's a great example of policymakers having no idea.
One didn't really have the impression that they understood Mark Zuckerberg.
Yet they are expected to effectively regulate this platform. We see this in the debate about backdoors, the going dark debate, where government people say, we want this, and techies say, well, that's just not possible. And they say, well, try harder. Say, well, that's not how it works. And so we are seeing a lot of these debates in cybersecurity, also actually in technology writ large, bridge tech and policy. And we need them together. I want to talk about that more later near the end, but I think it's really important. And one of the things I like to come to forums like this, and like to see techies at forums like this, because we have to be here.
Well, that's why we are here, yeah. But I wanted to bring in Bruno, because you started a year ago with the World Economic Forum. You built this new platform there. I think with around 20 people now. And isn't that what you are focused on, to change the dialogue on these issues?
Not only, I would say, not only for policymakers. We need meaningful information that can be understood from a decision maker, which is world leaders or C-suite or boards. They do not understand fully what cyber risk are and what could be the impact on the organizations, on the states. So we need to be able to change the narrative, how those people talk, especially, as you said, techies and more higher in the organization. And if you look at the ENISA threat landscape report of this year, this is one of the points. Cyber threat intelligence cannot be understood by decision makers. So how can you make a decision if you don't understand?
Well, you mentioned the Facebook hearings, and I think we all realize that we are not particularly competent on that issue. But isn't there a bigger dilemma that the government doesn't want the internet really to be secure because it makes it much easier to supervise it or to snoop? Isn't that one of the problems or the initial problems in the dialogue between techies and government people?
So I think this is a huge problem. You saw some of it in that opening talk by the UK diplomat, who talked all about how we need to design security in and how important it is to make sure things are designed securely. At the same time, that same government is trying to make sure that things are not designed securely, that they can be eavesdropped on. Now, these are both important equities, but the debate is not happening at that policy level. And so, I mean, the way I'll describe it is you've got one world, one infrastructure. Right? You can choose when you build the 5G network to make it secure so that nobody can eavesdrop, or you can make it insecure so that everybody can eavesdrop. I get that you want to eavesdrop and that you don't want anyone else to, but that's not an option. So when we talk about designing security in, we need to understand what that means. And that means, yes, we will lose intelligence capabilities. Now, you have to decide that's worth it. Right? Because, right, you know, every one of my legislators carries one of these. And it's kind of scary that lots of people are eavesdropping on it. Now, are we willing to give up eavesdropping on the bad guys? So this is a policy debate informed by tech. That is the correct debate to have. I can't answer it. And we need to have this conversation.
But do you have the impression, because you have these discussions, do people talk past each other, or do we increasingly talk with each other on that issue?
Me?
Yeah.
Totally past each other.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very little tech-informed policy dialogue in my space. Conversation about vulnerabilities.
Do you think it's better in Europe, Bruno?
No, just to complete what Bruce started. For me, states, what they want prosperity, economic prosperity and stability for their country. So building backdoors is going against that. I don't believe that a country which is democratic and advanced would push toward this. And
yet Australia. And the UK.
So
You want to keep going, or
the US?
yes. So more and more the citizens will put pressure on being sure that those infrastructure are secure, have no bad laws, and we should advocate for this. And in Europe, we do that at least. So.
But when you discuss that with people in Europe, do you have the impression that they are more receptive than, for example, US policymakers?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, and this affects everything. So here's 2 stories from the news in the last 4 days. So you can hack construction cranes, right? Those giant things that move tons of heavy stuff around. You can hack those and like fling those about. 2 days ago, I learned you can hack refrigerators in supermarkets. Turn off, make them go hot, turn them off. Right, so here's 2 random IoT things which are like stupidly insecure, easily hackable. They're going to be around for decades. And then this is the kind of vulnerability we're living in. And those aren't exceptions. Those happen to be the 2 that researchers looked at last week. It's not going to be any different for anything else.
But we mentioned the role of government, but then we have these huge institutions, private institutions like Facebook, and we were supposed to have Alex Stamos here on the panel, who fell sick, unfortunately, but who left Facebook because he was not convinced that they really wanted to clean up their act. I mean, I understood.
Okay, Alex, a little more complicated
yeah,
than that.
it's a more nuanced issue. Okay.
No, he left Yahoo because they were incompetent. Facebook, he didn't leave because they were incompetent.
Okay, well, my impression
I'm
was that he wasn't
channeling
happy with
my inner Stamos a little bit here.
Okay. Well, but you want to maybe elaborate on the role of these institutions, because I think you call that the surveillance capitalism.
So surveillance capitalism is a term by Shoshana Zuboff. She teaches at Harvard Business School. Her book is fantastic. I recommend that everybody go by and read it. and use the term constantly. And she's talking about really a new market-driven force based on collecting and using our data. And it's permeating every industry, not just Facebook. I mean, Facebook and Google are the poster children for surveillance capitalism. But, when you buy an interconnected refrigerator, it's collecting data on what you're doing with it, and it's going to use that to try to upsell you, to try to, and going to sell that data to third parties.
Is that a term you would use at the World Economic Forum, surveillance capitalism?
Oh, I hope so.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
No, to build on security by design is a never-ending story that we want to push for better design, especially better cybersecurity from the early design. But this is still not there, and we need to transform cybersecurity into a competitive advantage for organizations. So if you look at the new Cybersecurity Act in Europe, there's a cybersecurity framework.
From last year, you mean? Or,
Yes,
yeah.
that is going to be developed. So this is a very strong incentive for organizations to adhere and to go through a certification that will demonstrate that their product is better to another one for the same.
And this is hard. I mean, for Facebook, security kind of isn't a competitive advantage. Right? I mean, being able to spy on their users is a competitive advantage. That's how they make money. Equifax, right, the big data broker hacked the United States, couldn't care less about the security of its users because I can't fire Equifax. I mean, they collect my data without my knowledge or consent. Right? Siemens sitting in this chair, I mean, it would make sense to say, right, our new industrial controllers, the Americans can't destroy your centrifuges now, right? I mean, that is a competitive advantage, and if they say that, that's going to be worth something. But by and large, we've been trying to make security a competitive advantage for a bunch of decades, and we've been failing. I liked all the talk up here about regulation. Right? It's all about incentives, and if there isn't going to be the market, this is what you got. You can hack the construction cranes. That's the market solution. You don't like it, we need to raise the cost of insecurity. You heard a bunch of ideas up there about liabilities and regulations, standards. Those all
But if you're skeptical of regulation, what can be done? I mean, do we have only ourselves to blame eventually then because we as consumers accept that deal? Or?
So, I mean, I tend to think people who are skeptical of regulations just like to pretend, but they still go out to eat at restaurants, right? They still fly in airplanes. They still drive in cars. They're not actually worried this building will collapse on their heads. Right? Regulations are kind of how society, until the crane comes, right?
Yeah.
Regulations are how society functions when we can't ourselves be experts. Right? I boarded a Lufthansa plane yesterday, and I did not check the engines. I wouldn't even know how to. Right? I relied on both German and U.S. regulations to ensure that I would have a nice, safe, comfortable flight, and the pilot would be trained and rested, and all of those things. So there really isn't any solution other than regulations. And that doesn't mean you must do this, you can't do that. It's flexible standards. It's much more complex. It's liabilities.
But then for airlines, security is a competitive advantage.
Actually, airline security is not. I mean, you never see airlines competing on security. Right? Fly our airline, we do full body searches on everybody. Right? Fly our airline, everybody carries a gun, so you don't have to worry. Right? You never see those slogans. Security and airlines want this. They want it not to be their problem when something happens. They do not want to be blamed. They want the side to be blamed, the country to be blamed, but not the airline, not the aircraft. We had the Airbus person here. Right? They're not competing on security of a flight. They are totally pushing that to the government.
Sorry.
Yes, to go in that direction is we have to simplify security for consumer and customers. That's a fact. It's the same as you said for taking a plane. I will not check the engine. So it's always a usability versus cybersecurity. Why do we use still password today, 2019? Why do we still design system with passwords? We keep saying password is not safe. And we're still building systems with passwords. So
that's good. And this is hard. We talked about on stage about educating the user. Users are hard to educate. And it's a couple of things. if you look at real education for people, it's simple things that are actionable. Wash your hands, right? I can do it. It works. It can't be complex. It can't be subtle. And a lot of times, and certainly in the tech industry, we blame the user. So think of the kind of advice we give users. Don't plug in a strange USB stick. I mean, what kind of dumb advice is that? It's a USB stick. What else am I going to do with it? Don't click on a link. They're links. Don't open an attachment. But it's an attachment. I mean, these are all failures of the tech system. Why in the world should plugging a USB stick be a vulnerability? Because USB was designed insecurely. Why should it be that clicking on a link or opening an attachment is an insecurity? Because the operating system is designed badly. Don't blame the user for bad tech decisions.
In your writings, you are pretty down on technologies such as cryptocurrency, blockchain as well, pretty much because you think that you can have trust in tech, in institutions, only in people, or?
So blockchain's complicated. I just wrote an essay, appeared in Wired last week, where I kind of said that there's like absolutely nothing here. There's no value here. So all the people who have been sold a bill of goods, you can relax.
It's a pretty nuanced statement.
It is a bill of goods, and it'll go away soon. Don't worry about it. And it's a complicated discussion of how you really can't replace trust with verification, and you can't replace institutions with code. And any system where if you make a mistake, you lose your life savings is fundamentally not trustworthy. It doesn't matter how good the encryption is.
Are you a little more positive about?
I have to be.
Yeah.
You guys no choice. This is the bottom.
Yeah. I know, it can't get.
No, so, surely that in the industry we try to develop solutions which are secure for the people, etc. But at some point, that's true that it can be broken, it can be obsolete, etc. But what is important is to design it from the beginning, right from the design phase. Obviously, innovation has to go fast, and many steps taking into account cybersecurity is not taken into account still today. So this is the main issue.
I want to come back to that dialogue that you mentioned. When you look at institutions like Harvard Law School or so, 20-30% of the graduates go into public service law because even though it's, I mean, they make much less money, but they think it's worth it and they are doing something meaningful, and it's also encouraged by the professors. And so the number of tech people going into pro bono work is lower.
So this is hard, right? And if you think about public interest law, right, it is a thing. If you are a public interest lawyer, your mother is proud of you. Right? You go work for an institution, you're working for the government, you're working for the people, and you're making less money. And he's right. Right now, 20% of the graduating Harvard Law School class doesn't go work for a corporation or a law firm, goes to work for public interest law. And last year, Harvard had a seminar because that number is so low. The number of computer science graduates who do this is basically zero. And yes, there's certainly
because
money
there are no offers, or because they don't want to?
I think it's a couple of things. I mean, I think there's not a lot of demand. You know, right now the number of technologists on congressional staffs is extraordinarily small in the United States. I don't think it's better in any European country. That the number of technologists working at some of these NGOs is very small. There aren't the opportunities, and also there isn't the supply. There's isolated instances, but not enough people. And this feels important. So here's the way I now teach at the Kennedy School, which is kind of neat, where I'm a techie teaching public policy. The Kennedy School, in the 20th century, the fundamental question of society was how much of our lives should be governed by the market and how much by the state. That defined the second half of the 20th century. And that's why the Harvard Kennedy School is populated with economists, because they could answer those sorts of questions. I think the defining question of this century is how much of our lives should be governed by technology and under what rules. So you need more technologists doing public policy to answer that question. And it's cybersecurity and AI and future of work and climate change and bioengineering and food safety. We can go on and on. These are all deeply technical issues.
But do the techies understand to the same extent that politics is difficult?
No, I mean, it's got to go both ways,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we have this disconnect in both directions, right? Techies, I mean, you heard the techie answer to solving cybersecurity, more bug bounty programs, right? And that's a great techie answer. It fails in policy. But as a techie, that's a perfect answer. Sorry if you're still in the room.
But you work for an institution that is basically trying to change that. I mean, when you started your institution, or not, but your center a year ago, how did you attract people to work for the forum on this issue? Because these people are probably in high demand.
There's a wider issue in cybersecurity. It's a skill shortage as a whole in general. So I believe there's around 3 million by 2021 in terms of skill shortage. And this is not only in Europe or Northern America, but it's also across the planet, in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. And the problem is how we build programs, which are university programs, which are flexible enough and close enough to the private demand, private sector demand. And how we attract those people to follow those courses and engage into careers into cybersecurity.
But what could help?
What he means to say is WEF is cool.
Well,
That
I thought that's a given. Yeah.
But that's how you're going to get people, right?
Yeah. But I mean, what else could be done? I mean, can we bring in foundations? Can we bring in technology-related journalism? What are all the options to change that mindset?
In the U.S. at least, I think foundations will play a big part.
I think Ford Foundation.
Ford Foundation. I mean, right now, I don't know if people are going to go to the RSA conference next month in California. RSA is letting me do a one-day mini track on public interest tech that Ford Foundation is funding. We have 6 panels and bring in people from academia, from industry, from NGOs, from government to talk about different ways that technologists are changing the world, not by building a new tech tool, but by affecting public policy.
Have you met a U.S. policymaker who's really tech-savvy?
Yes.
Do we know him or her?
Not a lot of them.
Okay. What about you European politicians that you met that are really...
I've met more
buzzwords?
tech-savy European politicians.
Yes. No, the forum has developed the Fourth Industrial Revolution Center in San Francisco, and the idea is to bring the tech side to the policy making. So the forum is steering projects around that, mobility, future of healthcare, blockchain, drones, etc. So there's an influx of people from the tech side going to the policy making, but it takes time because there's not a lot of people in there.
Are there jobs? Are there jobs for them in the government, in the agencies, in the legislators?
It's more in terms of discussion, bringing people together on the table and making sure that they understand each other and they understand where they have to go.
So if you say we need more techies in government, it would be a good idea if Zuckerberg ran for president? Or?
I'm not sure that's related.
Okay. Well, he's a
So
techie.
give him,
Give
him something to do.
Okay. Thanks so much for the dialogue and good luck with the next panel.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.